So today we're going to be talking about intuitive eating, eating intuitively, and basically nutrition and food in general. So obviously people on the panel is going to be different opinions about intuitive eating and eating intuitively. One of the first things we actually want to go through, and this is just a really unfortunate name situation. So you have intuitive eating and you have eating intuitively. Have you both heard of, have people heard of intuitive eating and eating intuitively? Put your hand up if you have. Yeah, so pretty much everyone. Intuitive eating is actually a 10-step principle process, and you have to be qualified in intuitive eating to talk about it. It's very holistic, it's a structured program. And then you've got eating intuitively, eating mindfully, which is where you're still honoring your hunger, but you don't actually need to be a practitioner to talk about it. But the names are just super similar. So we're talking about eating intuitively, eating mindfully. We will touch on calories and macros and things like that as well in terms of different goals, aesthetics and things like that. But first things first, I actually want to direct the first question at you, Ryan.
Oh, I knew that.
Only because I think people might be quite interested with your diet as a bodybuilder and the fact that you actually don't really track.
Yeah, no, so that's very true. So when obviously bodybuilding is all about counting macros and all that kind of stuff, but I found early on in my career that it wasn't enjoyable for me to be so specific on calorie counting, and it became a chore and monotonous, and it wasn't, you couldn't sustain that for 365 days of the year, or that's how I found it anyway. Some people can, some people can't, and I was a guy who lost the enjoyment when it came down to counting every calorie I was eating. That being said, when I'm dieting for a show, which is obviously 12 weeks of the year, or 16 weeks depending, I will weigh out my food, so I'll know the grammage of my food, but I won't look at the calories and be too specific with that. I go on how I feel in the mirror, how I look in the mirror, how my pumps are when I'm training, how long the pumps last for whilst I'm training, my mental state, if I'm fatigued, and all those type of factors when I'm dieting. A lot of bodybuilders will count everything down to a T, but as soon as I come off prep, I know roughly what my maintenance level is, what that looks like when you look at it on a meal plan or like food, and I will just be in a surplus of that. So I'll enjoy normal food with my family. I will eat clean. I'll be conscious of what I'm eating, but I will still be able to have normal meals with my family. We eat normal every night, like together. I say normal, but normal food. But yeah, that's how I've always been.
100%. And then Siobhan, yours is a little bit different because you've had bodybuilding experience where I think you did track quite significantly, and then you've done more of like a 360 with eating intuitively, and you said eating mindfully.
Yeah, so I did a bodybuilding show in 2017, a long time ago, and but at the time I loved tracking calories. Like, I found it gave me so much freedom, and I didn't have to eat. I think I just always loved Nutella, and I just wasn't willing to cut it out to be shredded, and it really helped me stick to to be in a calorie deficit in the right way, to get shredded, to be on stage. I ate to by the numbers, and then afterwards, I mean, it was a roller coaster of up and down. I wasn't strict enough. I just didn't care enough what I looked like. But I found then once I started training for performance, I started doing CrossFit and Muay Thai, and I just kind of was like, I don't care what I look like anymore. I'm just going to actually listen to my hunger levels rather than looking at the numbers. And of course, initially you can't just switch off. Like, I found initially I would still think of the numbers. So in my head I'm like, oh, it's about 500, that's about I probably had 2,000 calories today. So I think you've always got that knowledge in your head, and sometimes we talk about eating mindfully, eating intuitively, but you always know if you've been doing it for a long time. And then I started just practicing on the hunger level. I'd say try not to let myself get too hungry. If I'm at a 2, I don't make great decisions when it comes to food. And then don't eat past the point of fullness. I go to like a 7, and of course there's times I go way over. But by going like that, I can choose what's important to me. And sometimes I do want to get a bit leaner. It doesn't mean like I gave up on being shredded. It means I was able to listen to what I needed after training, before training, training for performance, and then a little bit of me would go, okay, maybe go a little bit hungry just so I know I'm in a calorie deficit because I do want to be lean this summer or something like that. I didn't just go, never diet, I just eat mindfully with a few little tools. I'm just going to slow down. That's the big thing, like just slowing down and going, yes, I do want the Nutella, but I also want to be lean, so what do I really want? And sometimes it is the Nutella, so it's not an easy thing to teach people, but it takes practice and kind of letting yourself go. Well, kind of.
Yeah. Amazing.
I think that's the thing that's difficult for people to establish, is that balance that you've experienced for those years. Lex, coming to you, because I think you're someone who can potentially talk about how your ethos may have changed over the years since you've been in the industry, because I think you came from a time where diet culture was like very strong in the industry to like where we are today, where things are moving to a more balanced lifestyle driven style of dieting.
Yeah, so for people who don't know, I came in the macro introduction era, so I was one of the first guys to kind of be utilising macros to diet for bodybuilding shows. But when you've got normally a week out from a show, people are on turkey, water, dying, napping in chairs, complaining about life. I was having like a barbecue with sausage and white bread, and it just blew people's minds.
But did you ever win a show?
Huh?
I'm joking. I'm joking, sorry. Go on,
Did I ever win? Yeah. Yeah, I did.
Sorry.
Not the big ones, the big ones, but no, in terms of like bringing body fat down to competitive levels, of being very, very lean, it worked, but I'm also from a science-based background, so I went from full bro, like literally turkey, rice cakes, 6 almonds. There's no reason to eat 6 almonds, I just thought that's what somebody else did, I'm doing that, and working full-time whilst doing a lot of nonsense. To literally the next week flipping, after seeing the science behind macros, and flipping the next week to having ice cream and regular fruits and everything involved, just making more of a healthy balance, but I did count shit down too. Like a Rice Krispie in the bowl. Like I was fanatical with it to a point.
I do when I'm dieting, but I just meant off season.
Yeah.
I just switch off for the rest of the year.
But I do think that measuring sector is important. Like you need to be able to gauge volume of food that you're eating. If you're not gauging volume, you're going to be like this every day, up and down on the scales, up and down in the mirror, which is just disheartening in itself. Like
are you meaning for a bodybuilding show? Or
no,
for
I mean in general.
In general.
So if you feel like you're waking up and you're fluctuating week to week, can be very, very frustrating. Water retention levels can rise and fall depending on how late you finished eating one night to how early you finished eating the previous night, which is where intermittent fasting can come into play, which is not magic, it just makes you eat in a time frame so that you look more consistent when you wake up every day, so you feel a bit better and you can stay controlled. But for me, having that era of just really monitoring macros to a really high level then allowed me to be able to stop monitoring at certain points, but still be able to look at the food I'm putting on my plate and keep it within a realm of control. And also, it removes guilt from food, because when you do macros, you realise I can eat chocolate if I want to eat that chocolate and utilise that many carbs and that many fats, and you eat it guilt-free knowing it's within my allowance and my body's just going to chew it up. Whereas most people's opinion, and you said it before, you said clean food. I really hate this. I hate this term. There's no such thing as clean or unclean food. Unless you're washing your food with fairy liquid, that's clean food. But outside of that, it's just how impactful is that food? Is it a low impact food or high impact food? And that's the bet. There's no bad food, there's just too much of certain types. And if you want chocolate and you're willing to give up X amount of calories for that chocolate, it's fine, eat that chocolate, it's going to do you no harm. But then you just realise you're giving up, later in the day, some other foods that might be more satiating.
Yeah, so this is more of a question for everyone, even you might be able to answer this one. With regards to dieting, and the reason intuitive eating as a practice was created is because over 5 years the long-term success rate of diets is so poor, as in 80% of people regain the weight from the diet. Why do you think diets are that unsuccessful?
Because people think they're a short-term solution. Dieting is what you eat on a day. Your diet is what you eat daily. It's not something you do for 8 to 10 weeks. I think that's the main point.
Oh, you should call it a diet, a nutritional plan. Like a lot of people class diet as, like you say, 12 weeks and whatnot, and then they can't sustain it. For me, I don't fit in really with intuitive eating, because I do eat quite a structured diet, 365 days a year, but I choose to do that, and it's part of my living, and I enjoy it, and I've been able to sustain it for 20 years now. coming up saying that
It's
20
all
years.
over.
Whoa. But for some people that's not sustainable. I think, like you've just said, with over the 5 years not being able to sustain it because they're trying to eat foods that they don't particularly like or fit in with their day to day. I found something that works for me and I enjoy what I do, and I think that's what's important when you're dieting.
It's almost like I was going to say the opposite, but for me, it's like I stopped eating to look a certain way.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like now, I found a way that I found an environment where I train and I eat well and I stay lean. But I was going to say the reason it probably doesn't last is that people don't want it enough, and sometimes people can get triggered when you hear that. But that's why I don't track everything, because I'm like, I actually don't care as much what I look like anymore. So it's not that important to me. So I'm like, like if I have to decide between two foods or decide between a higher calorie, lower calorie, even if it means the scale's going to go up tomorrow or anything, it's like, it's okay because I don't really care what I look like. Now saying that, I think there is a healthy, like obviously health is important, and I would never just go eat terrible for so long, which I have done for the last 6 weeks. I've been on my holidays. But I think I naturally then will crave routine and eating. I think like as long as you have those good habits in place, if you do go like too far one way, I think naturally you want to come back to that set point. But it's not like, I'm not as strict. It's not like, oh my God, I have to eat this because I want to look that way. I think that's what other people realize, is that they get, they diet hard and they diet down to the way they think they'll find happiness, and it's not there. So then they don't keep.
Who's on a diet right now? Hands up. Who's actually actively dieting?
I've just
There's
started.
not that many actual people. How many of you just eating what you want, whenever you want? How many of you feel good about that in the way you look? Yeah, that's pretty even.
Perfect.
That's pretty even. So,
Kind of holding me.
are most people highly active? Yeah. So you're buffering the diet with more movement. Yeah, so this is a sensible way of doing things. If you're moving a lot and being very active, you're going to have a higher calorie allowance. If you're sitting and more sedentary through a certain day, just eat less that day. And you can literally start on that base level. Have a big, no, I'm not allowed to eat that full tub of popcorn today because I've sat down for 8 hours editing or whatever you've been doing. But if you've been out hiking, gym, you've done all that day, eat intuitively in the sense of I get way more allowance this day. I find that for me really helps. Even if I'm trying to actively gain weight, if I've been sat still for a long period of a single day, I will cut my calories that day, cut the volume of food I eat, because I know it's not going to get utilised in the right way. It's going to be stored more in those fat cells and stuff like that because I'm not actively using it. Because I tend to put a lot of my carbs around training and activity times when I do take them in. So if there's no activity, I pull those down, and I find that I don't drop weight that way, but I do keep gaining the good weight when I want it. And so that stops me putting on excess.
I think the common theme is that a lot of people tend to dip in and out of eating intuitively and dieting, and there's nothing wrong with that because, like you were saying before, you don't intuitively, but I would argue in some periods that you potentially do, and it's fine to do that. And I think it's good for a lot of people to do that rather than just diet all the time, because I think one of the big things that comes from dieting is like 30 to 35% of people who are dieters then transition into pathological dieters. Then 20 to 25% of that go into eating disorders, which is like one of the biggest causes of death rates in the UK. So it's good to have an intervention sometimes of eating more intuitively just to bring balance back to your life as well. And there's nothing wrong with then dieting as well. Like if I diet now, I do it super aggressively. So like you would save up for a mortgage for your house, you have to spend a certain amount of time being really strict with your finances, and then you can just balance out by paying your monthly mortgage payments. I did the exact same with my diet, so I'll be super strict, go aggressive for like 2 or 3 weeks, get in shape, and I'll just be at maintenance calories then and just maintain it, and use intuitive eating as a tool to maintain it. So there's nothing wrong with flicking in between the two. You just can't do both at the same time. You can't diet and be on a calorie restricted diet and intuitively eat, because they just don't go hand in hand.
I think what you said about being a perpetual dieter, that's a really bad thing to be. So if you're jumping from diet to diet to diet to diet, whatever it is you're doing, you need consistency. Whether it's a really simple, just monitoring like the volume of things on your plate, or just mimicking meal for meal, like 3 meals a day, you need consistency over at least like 3 months to let it settle in and let you kind of monitor how your body's going to react. You can't do something for a week, 2 weeks, expect to see change, and then flip things up because it's not working the way you want. You need time and consistency to be able to make these micro adjustments as you go along. And you need to understand as well, if you mess up, it's cool, it's not going to hinder everything that you've done up to that point. You just messed up that one day or that one week. Just get back on track and then forget about it and move forward. I think a lot of people chuck everything out the window because they had like a week of mistakes, and it doesn't work like that. Your body will often fluctuate with water retention more than anything, which makes you feel bad, makes you think you put on loads of weight. But you can't gain tons of weight really quickly, just like you can't get shredded really quickly. It's the same, you know, it's the same seesaw.
Yeah, I was good. Like I coach women, and it's the biggest thing. I want them to count calories initially because I want them to learn. It's not like I want you to be really strict. I want your life to be restrictive. But the problem is they think, you know, they're thinking in clean and dirty or good and bad foods, and I want them to learn to make intuitive decisions, you know, to learn like, oh, maybe I don't want avocado with my eggs today if I'm trying to stay a bit leaner, rather than thinking good food, bad food. So I'm quite, not insistent, but I just recommend it to a lot of clients, to, even if it's for a couple of weeks. Just most women are actually eating too little for their goals. You know, they can't keep it up in the long run because they're eating too little. So most of the women are getting to eat more when they get their calories. They're like, how can I eat this much? I'm like, because you're actually going to eat like an adult, and you're not going to just have chicken and leaves. You're going to like eat so that you're full, so that you're not making irrational decisions. And that's probably the hardest thing. It's just women are ruined by diet, a lot of men as well, I'm sure, ruined by diet culture, and it's trying to let them learn about food to make their own decisions.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that you're doing there, is like, it's almost, we're teaching them that first lesson. It's like if you were to go dancing and you learn them steps, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and then you get into a flow. You don't have to count anymore, you just do it more with a flow, and that's what you're doing with dieting after you've learned those simple steps.
A big round of applause for everyone.
Thank you, guys.